Yeah! Lock it on 90.3. That's WHPC. Get that volume amplified for Lithuanian landslide. Lithuanian landslide. Lithuanian landslide. Lithuanian landslide. Lithuanian landslide. 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 Landslide!
On Lithuanian Landslide, the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Mark from Floral Park, Adomaitis. On the phone, the legendary Lithuanian-Canadian Hollywood actress, Ruta Lee.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
Labas.
Labas, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, Arachu, so much for taking the time to call in.
I am perfectly delighted to be speaking to a fellow Lithuanian in our beautiful United States.
Thank you so much, Ruta. Ruta, according to your website, rutalee.com, you were born Ruta Klemonis in Montreal, and by your teens, you were in Hollywood, first working and then fired from being a cashier at Grumman's Chinese Theater, but as fate would have it, years later, you were given a star on that Hollywood Walk of Fame, not far from that very box office that you once worked. Ruta, for those of us who may not be enlightened, could you please tell us of how your vow as a young person to return to that very theater, but as an actress later in life, came true?
Well, isn't that an amazing story? During my high school years, I went to Hollywood High. I had been in Catholic schools all of my life until then in Montreal, where I was born, and then, of course, in Los Angeles. And finally, I escaped the wrath of all the nuns, although that's the only education I think I ever got, by going to Hollywood High simply because they had a school bus that would pick me up and take me to school every day, whereas my father used to have to drive me to Immaculate Heart and so on and so forth. Anyway, I took a job during the summer while I was going to high school as an usherette. I don't know if anybody is old enough in this world to remember that we used to have ushers and usherettes in all the movie theaters to see you to the seat, you know. And I got a job at the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater, and there I stood in my little beautiful tunic, red tunic and black pants at the top of an aisle, seeing people to their seats when necessary, and other than that, standing at the top of the aisle and watching all my beautiful movie queens, June Hayward, June Allison, Mitzi Gaynor, all those marvelous people, Betty Grable, that became friends of mine as I got older and into the business. But I would watch them and just pray and say, oh, dear God, let me do that someday. Please, Dieve, let me do that sometime. And then I got promoted to Candy Girl, which was okay because I've been lousy in math and I'm still lousy in math. I could deal with it because everything was 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents, 25 cents, 50 cents, you know. So that was okay, and I could still, when not selling popcorn or whatever, cut out to the top of the aisle and watch my movie queens. Then one day, the cashier in the box office got sick, and I got promoted to box office. And I thought, I can't do this because tickets were like $1.98 or $2.35, odd numbers,
right?
Not nickels and dimes. And I said to the manager, I said, I can't do this. I really can't. He said, oh, no, it's easy. You just punch in 2 at $1.98 and then punch in $5 or $10 or whatever they give you, and it'll give you the right change. Well, hell, Mark, I was $40 short that night. Oh, my gosh. And I got fired. He thought I'd stolen the money. And there I was in tears saying, you'll be sorry. One of these days I'll come back and put my hand and footprints in here. Well, I didn't get my hand and footprints in, but that many years later, I got my star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and right in front of the box office.
Oh
now,
gosh.
Is that serendipity or what? Isn't that a great story?
That's unbelievable. I mean...
And I keep saying to everybody who comes to visit my star, please polish it while you're there.
It's amazing. Ruta, in your best-selling memoir, Consider Your Ass Kissed, you wrote, As a young starlet in 1964, you made international headlines when you telephoned then-Soviet Premier Khrushchev in regards to releasing your 90-year-old grandmother from Siberia. Would you please share that story with our Lithuanian Landslide audience?
Wow, I'd be very happy to. It's a rather complex story in that I was the first in our family, because we moved from Montreal to Hollywood, California, and I was the first to become a citizen of the United States. Therefore, I was the one that started making out what was required by the Soviet authorities in those days, a vizov. A vizov meant an invitation in English, in Lithuanian, and in Russian. And it was filled with the usual BS that you had to give the Soviets. Dear grandmama, you are aging and you're not well, and you're becoming a drain on your family and the state. Come to California. I will take care of you. I will cover all the expenses. And this vizov had to be stamped by a notary. The notary had to have his seal approved by the city, which meant more ribbons and a stamp. Then you sent all this package to the state of Sacramento, the state of California, and they put their seal on it. Then you sent the whole thing to the State Department in Washington, and they put their seal on it. Now these 3 pieces of paper weigh 1.5 pounds, and that got sent to your relative in the Soviet Union, and in this case, my grandmother was in Siberia. And the local official would take a look at it, be impressed with all the ribbons and the stamps, would say "niet," and 6 months later I had to redo the whole thing all over again. And I did that, Mark, for 12 years. So it took tenacity, it also took patience, and it took money to have everything printed and transcribed and translated and everything else. Anyway, I had gone to all of my political friends that I had, and I went to my senator and I went to my congressman, and everybody said I can't really do anything about dealing with the Soviet Union. I even went as far as the presidency, and nobody could help me. I went out with friends one night because we had just gotten a letter from Lithuania. My grandmother, in those 12 years that I was doing this, was allowed to go back to Lithuania with other members of her family that she had found. And we got a letter not from her because she didn't write. She never went to school. She didn't know how to write. So a cousin was writing saying, thank you for all the packages we had sent to Siberia, all the packages we sent to Lithuania that helped sustain them, that bought them, a cow, and they were able to have cheese and that sort of thing. And the clothes that she wanted to be buried in, because every Lithuanian will know that your bobute has to have a black skirt and a white blouse and an apron and a scarf, to be buried in. And I went out with friends that night. My mother was in a spate of tears, so was I. And the more wine they poured, the more evident it became that I had to do something very dramatic and something very different. Mm-hmm. So I did. At what I thought was a good hour to match up with Moscow, I placed what then we had, which very few people remember, a person-to-person call, which meant you paid twice as much for the call if you got through to your party, but if you didn't pay for the call. So I placed a person-to-person call to Nikita Khrushchev, the Kremlin, Moscow, USSR, and that silly telephone operator, the American, said, how do you spell Khrushchev? Well, who the hell knows how to spell Khrushchev, with the the C's and the, oh, well.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, we keep going back and forth with the Russian operator who says, no, niet, no, no possible speak it Khrushchev. But we keep trying. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, at 6 a.m. in the morning, which is 9 o'clock in Washington, I start calling the Russian embassy in Washington. And I talk to everybody from the gardener to the window washer to the chief cook. And it's niet. I can't get through to anybody that can help me.
Right.
Finally, I'm sobering up and I'm beginning to get a little testy. And I hear the operator say, Mr. Khrushchev, no speak it English. You speak it with Mr. Vorishov. He interpreter for Mr. Khrushchev. And I remembered that he was the very attractive young man that traveled with him when he was in the United States, banging his shoe on the podium, saying rather rude things. And my father, who was fluent in Russian, used to laugh and say, oh, my goodness, Khrushchev didn't say that. That interpreter is making it palatable for our American ears, you know. And so I said, yes, I'll speak to him. And he gets on and he says, Miss Lee, we're delighted to talk with you. We know all about you here in the Soviet Union. We run your films. They used to run Seven Brides every 20 minutes, I think. and he said, what can I do for you? And I said, I want to come to the Soviet Union, not just the Soviet Union. I want to come to Lithuania. Nobody was allowed into any of those satellite countries that the Soviets had taken over, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, unless you were a very high Communist Party official. And then they might let you in, but even then it was a rare thing. And I said, I want to come to Lithuania, and what's more, I want to bring my mother and father, who have not been there in 35 years. And he said to me, well, why don't you talk to your congressman about it? And I said, what in hell does my congressman have to do with my traveling in your country? I need permission from you. This is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of the heart. I don't even know if my grandmother is alive or dead. If she's alive, I'll see her. If she's dead, I'll go to her gravesite. Will you do this for me? Well, I must have pushed the right button with him, because he said to me, present yourself again to the Russian embassy in Washington in 30 minutes. And I thought, oh, hell, I'm going to get the runaround again. You know, they're just kicking me over to the next guy. However, when I called back this time in Washington, the hotlines must have been flashing, because I was immediately connected to the first secretary at the embassy. And what was the first the first secretary but a Lithuanian?
Oh, my gosh.
So we connected immediately, and to cut this very long story short, within 48 hours, my mother and father and I were on a Pan Am plane heading to Moscow, then doubling back. You had to go through a gate city, then back to Vilnius, where we were treated like the royal family of England. It was unbelievable. They really were absolutely phenomenal. Of course, I didn't know it, but just before I left, my publicist at the time, Barbara Best, said, you know, you're going to Lithuania. It'd be good if somebody knew you were there. What if they decide to keep you? And I thought, oh, okay. So we did a quick luncheon with James Bacon, who was the head wire services for Hollywood man. He was the head correspondent. And he did a story that made the front pages of every paper in the world. I didn't know about it because I was on a plane and not seeing those papers. And in the Soviet Union, we certainly weren't going to be seeing those papers. And the story was, you know, young starlet fights for grandmother to bring her out of Lithuania, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, what did the Soviet authorities have to do but be nice to me, you know? And especially being Lithuanian, the Lithuanians were glad to have me there. I mean, it was all run by Lithuanian communists at the time. And we had lunch with the president at the time in Lithuania. He invited me to the Lithuanian White House. And he said, Ruta, I know how you feel about communism and how you have been very outspoken about it. But let me tell you one thing. Be happy that it's me, a Lithuanian here in this seat, and not some Chinese, which I thought was a very interesting remark to make. So that's kind of the story. So then we found my grandmother in a hospital. She had been miraculously moved from up near Klaipėda, and everybody in the entire hospital was in a spate of tears except for my grandmother, who smiled her fabulous, toothless smile and said, "What am I going to cry about? This is the happiest day of my life."
Oh, my gosh.
I went back 6 months later because the doctor said she couldn't fly at the time, and got permission to bring her out of the Soviet Union and Lithuania and into the United States, where she lived 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, never walking on the carpets. She always thought they were to be hung on the wall.
Oh.
And she was just an incredibly darling, funny lady. The Tonight Show had her guesting on it because they had followed my adventures in Lithuania, like the perils of Pauline. And when they came out, when Johnny Carson came out to California, and brought the show out, he asked to have my grandmother on the show.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, of course, my grandmother didn't understand or speak a word of English, but she sat there sort of holding her hands together and rocking back and forth. And he got a little bit kind of nervous about that, and he said, "What is she saying? What is she thinking?" And she said, "Tell him he's the sweetest flower that grows in the garden."
Oh.
Now, if that isn't the most fabulous BS coming out of a 95-year-old lady.
That is amazing.
So I said, now I know where my show business came from. I think my grandmother was innately a showbiz person.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Ruta.
Uh-huh.
Ruta, although you have been a part of 20th century Americana, having acted in a myriad of some of our most beloved movies with Frank Sinatra, Audrey Hepburn, and television programs as far back as The Adventures of Superman and The Twilight Zone, to Love Boat and Fantasy Island, to Chips and Roseanne. You are also well known as a vocal spokesperson for the advancement of Lithuania, and in 2008 at a ceremony held in Vilnius, you were bestowed with Lithuania's highest honor by then President Adamkus, and as recently as late as last year during a gathering at your estate, current Lithuanian President Nausėda recognized your lifelong commitment to preserving our Lithuanian heritage. Ruta, what drives your relentless passion for Lithuania, and what are some of the traditions you uphold in your Hollywood estate?
Well, the drive, I think, comes from my parents, who left Lithuania because they really could see no future there. My grandparents, my grandmother on the maternal side and grandfather, scraped together the money to buy a passage for my father, who couldn't get into the United States. The quotas were closed. And so he took a job in Canada in the wheat fields in Saskatchewan. For a year, he had a contract and saved the money to bring my mother over. My grandparents were smart enough to say, get out of Lithuania, go to America, where everybody knows the streets are paved with gold. And so Canada was very good to them. Of course, they came with a Lithuanian work ethic. Let's face it. Anybody who came to the United States or Canada from Lithuania and they worked hard, they did very, very well. I am yet to know a poor Lithuanian. Everybody is very comfortable. They know how to work. They know how to save. They know how to put their funds into something worthwhile, usually real estate. Let's put it this way. My grandparents obviously knew that. And my parents were very grateful to Canada and then later to the United States because it gave them and me great opportunities to do what I love and make a living at it. And so my passion for Lithuania comes from them. They never forgot Lithuania. We always went to the Lithuanian parish, whatever city we were in, whether it was Montreal or whether it was here in Hollywood. We participated in all the Lithuanian festivities. I sang in the church choir. And I, of course, didn't have the opportunity to speak a hell of a lot of Lithuanian, except at home. And my Lithuanian is a very uneducated Lithuanian. It's very kaimiška, as we say, very countrified. And it's a different Lithuanian now. And my cousin, who is here with me and runs my household and takes care of everything, she and I managed to talk a little bit, more than a little bit daily, in Lithuanian. So I'm sort of improving as I go along. But I love the foods of Lithuania. Not all of them. I don't like zeppelinai.
Oh.
And I'm sure people are going to faint and die that I don't care for zeppelinai. But I do love koldunai and balandėlis and, all the good things. Rolled cabbage is a must at my house. And whenever I have American guests that are not Lithuanian, I provide the rolled cabbage. And of course I love our sausage and kopūstai, cabbage.
Of course.
All the good things like that.
Yum. A recent headline in LRT, Lithuanian National Radio and Television, read, thousands of Lithuanians lose passports each year due to restrictive citizenship law. And in one of your first emails to me last week in setting up this interview, you wrote that you were headed to the Lithuanian consulate to vote in regards to this matter. And you actually intertwined some humor into this significant matter by saying that you have 3 passports and you felt like you were in the spy business as opposed to show business. Could you please shed some light on the subject for those who are listening who may be in the dark about it?
Well, I truly feel that the best support we can give Lithuania is the love we have for it, talking about Lithuania. I mean, 20 years ago, I swear, nobody knew what a Lithuania was. Maybe a little further back, but it was never talked about. Nobody knew about those Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And I tried always to bring it to the forefront of any of my interviews or conversations, or whether it was radio or television or the press. Of course, keeping my name Ruta, I insisted on doing that when I was doing my first movie job, which was 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. They were sending us on a tour, and they said, the PR department came to me and said, Ruta, you'll never be a movie star with a name like Ruta Kilmonis. And I said, oh, okay. And so we kicked around a lot of names,
right.
And somebody said, what about Lee? And I thought, well, wait a second. The diminutive of Ruta is Rutella. In Yiddish, it's Rutala. In any language, I think it comes out Rutala. Well, Ruta Lee sounds very much like it, so let's go with Ruta Lee. And but having Ruta, I fought to keep that. I thought it's always talked about, explain what Ruta is and so on and so forth. And now there are quite a few American Rutas. I have one that showed up at a theater in Fort Worth, Texas, where I was playing a show. And a message came backstage that a lady who named her daughter Ruta Lee after you is in the audience tonight, and they've come in from Tucumcari or wherever it was, New Mexico, and just to see you because she named her for you. And I thought, whoa, that's great. And then I hear every once in a while as fans, people who write me saying, my name is Ruta too, and I'm not Lithuanian, but I have that name. So I'm very proud of the fact that a good, solid Lithuanian name that is very beloved in our country of Lithuania is now being known and heard of and used here by Americans as well.
I love it. Ruta, as we begin to wrap this interview up, can you please tell our listeners how you came up with the title for your book?
Oh, yes, I'd be happy to. George Pinocchio, who is ABC's red carpet man, well, he has heard me say forever, because he comes to all my Thalian events. As you know, Debbie Reynolds and I were the head mothers of a group called the Thalians, which was founded by young actors, and it's Hollywood for Mental Health, and we did big events every year. And whenever people gave me big money for or even small money for my Thalians, I would say to them, from the bottom of my heart, consider your ass kissed. Mm-hmm. And he said, I've heard you say that for years, and if ever you get this book finished, you must use that as your title. And he was so right. And I know sometimes in the Deep South, people will go, ooh, about using the word ass. And I thought, hold on a second. If Jesus could ride into Jerusalem on his ass, I can kiss it.
That's great.
I mean it gratefully. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I'm so grateful to anybody who is listening to this tonight, who has ever turned on a television because I was going to be on, or come to a movie to see me, or come to the theater to see me, or written me a letter, or supported my charity, or supported whatever I'm doing. All I can do is say from the bottom of my heart, and to you, dear Mark, and all my fellow Lithuanians, consider your ass kissed.
Thank you so much for being a part of Lithuanian Landside, Ruta. Good night.
Good night, and God bless you all, and God bless America, and certainly God bless Lithuania.